Hi there and welcome to this first demo video for PriceYourOwnBets.com. This is the first model up, the Snooker model, and so I'm just going to give a run through of the ideas behind, hopefully how to use it, and maybe find an edge somewhere, or just to arrive at some pragmatic prices based on some hopefully quite intuitive inputs. As you can see here, this model has three different tabs here. There's dashboard, this first one where most of the work occurs. We've got the input variables down the left hand side here, and the outputs, which are some of the main prices, on the right here. So we've got the match winner, the century match bet, because we do some century bets here, the correct score, and the total frames. On the other two tabs we've got more prices. So on century prices we've got the chances of exactly 0 to 7 and over 7 centuries, and then under overs for those same numbers here. And we also have the odds and the probability of each market. On the frame prices we also have some handicap markets and some total frames over under. So quite a few markets if we can get this model working, to have a look at the prices and compare with some bookmakers and just see how we do really. So let's go back to the dashboard then. We'll start here and work down through these variables to just get a feel for how we use this model. So the first decision to be made here is the best of frames. So obviously it's quite important when you're betting on something to know the details of the match. So if I click here on this drop down, I can go anything from best of 1 all the way to best of 35, the longest match, which is the world final. So most of the normal formats are here: best of 7 for the PTC tournaments, best of 9 for a lot of the other tournaments, 19, whatever. So we can change that, and obviously we get the relative correct score market here and total frames. So here at best of 9 it goes from 5-0 to 5-4. If I put in the first round of the World Championship, best of 19, it goes up from 10-0 to 10-9. So for this demo I'm going to mainly stay at best of 9. It's a nice simple one to use, and this model will probably work strongest for short matches, to be honest, simply because of all the momentum and stuff that goes on in a game of snooker. Probably a model doesn't handle that quite so well. But so when we've picked our length of match anyway, we can go to put the player names in. As I'm going to reset this occasionally just to get back to the start, just so I can explore other areas, I'm not going to put any names in, but obviously you could put names in here and that would feed through to all the other places, just to make sure you're thinking of the right player at the right time. So not many structure variables for this particular model. So we'll move on to the basic trading variables, and the word basic could also just mean the most regularly used. These advanced ones down here are a bit more sophisticated, and you're probably going to play with them less during the match, more before, when to get a feel for how you think the game will progress. But I'll get back to that in a few minutes time. So these four white ones here are important for the match price, and they are: the first two is the player win frame percent. So that's just for a generic frame. So if you imagine a game of snooker was played as just a toss of a coin, it might not be a 50-50 coin, it might be 60-40 or 70-30 or whatever, and it's just you keep flicking that coin until somebody gets to the required number. So here it's 5-0 or 5-1 or whatever. So that frame win percent is controlled by this spinner bar here, so I can move up or down. So you can see it moving here: 33.5 against 66.5, 72.5 against 27.5. I've got this calibrated to 0.5% now, because it's really tricky when it's more detailed than that, down to 0.1. But if people want, I can just change this to a drop down or free text, or whatever proves to be the best way to use this model really. So the first way then that we might find some value with this model is if we know for sure what a percentage, we've looked at some data, or we have a feel from our own nous or whatever as to what the frame win percent for a particular match should be. So suppose I want to get this one to say 53%, which doesn't sound a lot, but actually it's quite a tight sport. Snooker, even the guys that win a lot probably only win 60-65% of their frames. So one other thing to be careful of actually is this second win frame percent here is for the current frame in running. So if you imagine that you did think it was 53, well, you need to get this one to 53 as well at the start. So then you're now at a match that starts with player A 53% to win each frame, and he's 53% to win this current frame, which obviously makes sense. So as you can see here, for this best of 9, a 53% win percent makes player A 57% to win the whole match. So that's to be expected because he's better than 50%, and this is more than one frame. If you're better than somebody at something, you want to play as many games as possible for your advantage to hold. You could compare it to a casino. They might not win on one roulette spin, but obviously over thousands of spins, their small edge is basically helping them to win money. So we can see that here by, if I make this match longer, so he's 57% with the best of 9. If I make it best of 19, he goes up to 60, and if I take it all the way to the world final, he'd be at 64%. So quite a strong chance of winning based on just being a little bit better, really, just because they're playing time and time again. So that's the first area where if you were to use this model regularly and really get a feel for this win frame percent, you might end up with a better match price than the market, and something to play with there, and certainly something to compare to the market. And if your match winners different from the market, hopefully better, then there's a good chance that all these other frame related markets like correct score will also be better than the market. So you might find some value in one of these markets as well. So that was working on getting to a desired percentage here, but it could be you just want to calibrate to the market to start. So suppose we actually think that this match at player A should be 64%. So if I move this up a bit, so I'll move it to 55 here and move this one to 55. It's a bit fiddly this, but so that's taken him to 161, so let's go a little bit more then, 55.5. Go to 55.5 here. So that gets him to 158. So basically, you can just get it to where you need to be, and the key at the start is to make these two spinners move to the same place, pretty much, so that you get to the sensible starting place for the first frame. So we can then consider what we do with this current frame adjust. So perhaps your skill in watching a snooker match is you just think for the particular frame being played, you're better at reading how likely one player is than the other to win it. So let's just go back to a 50-50 match now to illustrate this. So it's the start of the match, 50-50 as you'd expect, because they're both the same on these variables here. So suppose player A pots along red, he's in among the balls. So you're probably going to move this spinner this way because A's got more chance of winning. Now, do you move it up to here to 61? Do you move it to 76? And obviously the further you move it, then the more it's going to move his price here. So for example, he pots along red, but you actually think that the balls are terrible, there's colours on the cushions, there's no reds out of the pack, then you might only move it a little bit. So you might move him to say 57% here. So he's only got a small edge for that one frame, so he improves just a little bit for the match. On the other hand, the ball's all over the place, there's been safety behind the black spot, there's 7 or 8 reds in the open up the table, so boom, up at 81% here. So now it's a stronger indication for the match. He's now up at 59% because he's highly likely to go 1 frame to nil ahead. So this is another place where, if you know your snooker and you keep an eye on the frame, and it's one area of pricing that's not usually modelled by anyone, to be honest. I've tried to simulate in running prices for a frame before, and it's quite tricky to do, maybe based on the context of how many balls are on the cushions, or how many balls are in safe positions. So and then so you're up here and suddenly he misses a black off the spot, boom, you're straight down here, and there was a great big jump, so from 59 to 42. So you play with this slider and you get used to it, and you might find some nice prices here to compare with the market. So let me just reset this once more. That was managing the current frame, and down here now you can obviously do the other part of the in-running, which is to score frames. So here you've got player A's frames and player B, so suppose I give the player A the first frame. So here he jumps all the way from 50% to 64, and obviously this is quite a short match, best of 9, so that one frame has, you know, quite an impact. If I go to a shorter match, even say best of 5, he's up at 69%, and a longer one, best of 19, is down at 59%. So you know, basically, again, as you'd expect, one frame is more of a lead in a shorter match, simply because, you know, you're more of a percentage of the way to the win. So as we change all this stuff in the frame prices will keep up. So here, so you had a handicap here, for example. So player B minus 4.5 frames. Well, that's a loser now, because even if he wins 5-1, he's not won by more than 4.5 frames. You know, I can also give another frame, so make it 1-1. And if we go back to the frame prices, then here, well, it can't be under 5.5 frames now, because there's at least 6 frames. Somebody has to win 5-1. So basically you've got the context there. One thing to be careful of, actually, if I just reset this, is you know, suppose you were up here at 90 odd percent for this player to win this frame, or you'd even gone to 100, so it's not been given to him yet, but he is going to win this frame. So he's gone to the 64, like when I made it 1-0 here. Well, when you make it 1-0, you don't want to double count, you don't want to leave this here, so you need to bring this back to around 50, or, you know, where you want it to be. And this doesn't always have to be exactly the same as the generic one. So, you know, suppose it was 3-0 to the first player, you might think you know, he's going to win this frame a bit more likely than you know, just this 50-50 or whatever. So, you know, you might just start it, say, at 54. Or, you know, you might think the other guy's going to bounce back into it, so you know, drop it down to 45 odd. So generally, you know, you can move this one about here. So so that's basically everything to do with just the frame prices and the correct score. But this model will also do another couple of prices as well, which is to do with the centuries, and that's what these last two figures here are for. I'm going to reset this again just to start from scratch with these.